Next, we have Odyssey Marine Exploration, Inc. It trades on the NASDAQ under the symbol OMEX and is an ocean explorer committed to sustainable and responsible discovery, validation, and advancement of seafloor critical mineral projects, including polymetallic nodules for battery metals and subsea phosphate deposits for fertilizers. Please welcome Chairman and CEO Mark Gordon. Welcome to the conference today, Mark.
Thank you, Anna. It's so great to be here. And I'd like to thank everyone for participating. Pleasure to be here with you today. I'd like to start this presentation by positing a thesis that if you consider that mankind has been mining the dry surface of our Earth, the 30% of our Earth that is dry, for over 2,000 years, and you consider that 70% of our Earth is covered by water and the same minerals are available on the sea floor, it sets up an interesting proposition. And that is, if you consider how oil and gas extraction moved to offshore in the 1970s, that was precipitated by the fact that technology existed to extract that natural resource in an economic and environmentally sensitive manner and viable manner. And then a catalyst triggered the migration to offshore production of that natural resource. I would argue that we're at the same exact inflection point at this moment in time with minerals, that we'll be able to responsibly retrieve the minerals mankind needs from the seafloor. I think much like oil and gas, the technology existed in the 60s, but it was the Arab oil embargo of the early 1970s that really accelerated the movement to offshore extraction. Today, we find ourselves in a situation where certain critical minerals like rare earths are controlled by single countries. And so I think the same catalyst is setting up, and you're starting to see that in the news flow now. So think about that as I go through my presentation, that we may be at that very same moment in time, and there are only a small number of ways to play this burgeoning opportunity as investors today. Odyssey is, of course, one of them. My presentation today is subject to the typical disclaimers, including regarding forward-looking statements, estimates, and assumptions, and no assurance of actual future performance or results. The full disclaimers are available on the presentation that'll appear on our website, and I urge you to come take a look at the full presentation and these disclaimers there. So what I'd like to do over the next 15 minutes or so is walk you through how Odyssey became positioned to take advantage of this amazing opportunity that I think lies ahead. Why now might be a really interesting entry point for investors that are new to our story. And then I'm going to dig down and get into some of the economics of what these asset values could look like as they come through development. So I'll start with, how did Odyssey end up in this position? Odyssey's been operating for over 30 years now. First 15 years of our existence was focused on recovering valuable cargoes from historic shipwrecks lost in the deep ocean. And that experience positioned us perfectly for this opportunity because we learned how to operate complicated projects in the deep ocean successfully. In 2009, about 15 years into our history, we recognized this opportunity to leverage the team, tools, and technology we had built in a more scalable manner. And by 2012, we were actually actively engaged with equity participation in projects. So we've been at this for a little while. Anyone that's a Malcolm Gladwell fan knows you need 10,000 hours to mastery. Well, Odyssey has about 2.5 amount of that time operating in the deep ocean environment to depths to 6,000 meters, about 20,000 feet underwater. These are table stakes if you want to play in this emerging opportunity, and we've got them. Literally, there are billions of dollars of assets laying on the seafloor in the form of rocks right now. We're most focused on battery metals, as Anna indicated in her introduction, to power the renewable energy, green energy revolution, and phosphates that are gonna secure the world's food supply for generations to come. We also have projects for precious metals and critical minerals like rare earths. We'll talk a little bit more about that as I progress through this presentation. You may wonder, how does a microcap company believe they're going to be successful with such a grand opportunity? And I'd say the 3 decades of experience, our proven team, demonstrating we can work in this environment successfully is one of the critical success factors that position us. We have a diverse list of projects already developing a portfolio, different minerals, different regions, which gives us diversification from risk of commodity risk and geopolitical risk. At this moment, we'll talk more about this in a second. The market cap of our company doesn't reflect the values we're going to be describing today. And I think what you'll see, and you'll have to judge for yourself, but even modest success in any one of our projects represents a huge potential return opportunity for investors. So why is now an attractive entry point? And one thing I'll say is if you take a look at the charts as you do your work, you'll see that Odyssey maintained a $100 million plus market cap for an extended period of time until about September 17th of 2024, where you'll see some pretty significant value destruction that occurred at that point and since then. And to explain that, what had happened at that moment in time was that we actually had received a favorable ruling in a NAFTA case we had been fighting for 5 years on September 17th. The problem was the award size was disappointing to people that were investing in our stock for that outcome. It was a $2 billion claim, and the award with accumulated penalty interest at this point amounts to a little less than $60 million. Sounds like a lot of money, except that the way we financed the $25 million in legal expense in this 5-year battle was through non-recourse litigation funding. Now, had we not succeeded in this complicated international treaty dispute case, we would not have owed that $25 million back. If we did succeed, which we did, we owed the funders a multiple of that $25 million. So anyone that was playing Odyssey for that outcome was obviously disappointed in that outcome, and they exited our stock in the time since September 17th. What I hope to be able to start to communicate today, this is one of the first investor presentations we've done in a very long time, is to educate the market on Odyssey's broad portfolio of opportunities that are out there and could realize value in the near term, including the Mexican project that was the subject of this NAFTA action, which may not be that obvious to the market that there's still real hope for this project coming into production. So there are 3 basic drivers we'll go through in more detail here in a second. We have the Mexico project. We have battery metal projects. We're invested in 2 out of the 3 license holders in the Cook Islands, where we have polymetallic nodules that are heavy in cobalt, a desperately needed mineral for the green energy revolution. And then we've developed a proprietary system we call our global prospectivity system, which helps us evaluate where the best opportunities for seafloor minerals are in the world. And we rate these projects on a number of factors, 48 different factors, and we have a very robust pipeline to follow so we can continue to produce these assets in the years to come. Simply stated, the strategic edge is obviously we know how to find the right projects from our proprietary system. Over the years, we've built amazing partnerships with some of the most dominant and prolific players in the global offshore business. So having those partnerships in place will help ensure our success. And then finally, leveraging the 3 decades of actual experience Odyssey has successfully executing complicated offshore projects. These are the factors that are going to help ensure our success in this space as we move forward. As we think about how value develops in the various projects we have, we map it on a value curve. At the far left of the value curve, that's when opportunity first comes out of our global prospectivity system. At that point, it's fairly low value. It has not been de-risked through investment and time at sea to understand the resource. And as we spend that time and money working on the project, we ultimately move it to the far right of the value curve where it's very high value and it's de-risked and we're moving into production. The 3 projects we're going to talk about in more detail in a second here, CIC and OML, are two of our investments in the Cook Islands, 2 out of the 3 license holders there. And our Mexico project at this moment is furthest advanced on the value curve. There, we've completed the environmental impact studies and pre-feasibility studies. The remaining hurdle is working out an agreement cooperatively with the Mexican government to ensure we have the environmental permissions and license permissions we're going to require to be able to move that project into production. So if we start to put asset values to these opportunities, the middle column here, the second column, I guess, the net present value, those are internal calculations. Here and again, there are a number of assumptions on how these numbers were derived. I encourage you to ensure you familiarize yourself with these assumptions. But $1.3 billion net present value for the Mexico project at this point in time. The third column shows our ownership, Odyssey's ownership interest in the project at this point in time, 28%. The first column of values is just a 50% discount to the net present value to set up a range of values for you to consider. When we look at OML, in the footnote below, you'll note their website, omlus.com. OML has gotten to the point in their value development where they've published a resource estimate from an independent JORC report. It's $4.7 billion. Odyssey currently owns 7% of that project. And in the case of CIC, to be very clear here, this number has not been provided by CIC. What you see us doing just for illustration purposes is we've used OML's valuation for CIC. Now, the reason we've done that is because the mineralogy of CIC's license area, which is adjacent to OML's area, is the same. And their license area, in fact, is 10 times the size. But to be clear, CIC has not published a resource estimate. We are using OML's estimate of their area, 1/10 the size, to represent the potential value of CIC. When we dig down into these, let me come back to that slide for a second, because I think the key takeaway is if you look at this range of value, call it $670 million to $1.3 billion. And even if you take the low end of that range, cut it in half again, obviously that's still, the asset value is still a huge multiple to Odyssey's current market cap. So I think it illustrates the potential returns that could be realized in Odyssey stock as we progress these various projects up the value curve and when we have meaningful disclosures made about where these projects stand in their asset development. If you take even just a single project in the low end of the range and discount that, again, you still have a multiple to Odyssey's current market cap. As we dig down into the details of the project that are listed here, the Mexico fertilizer project, it's a world-class deposit. Independent experts have produced a resource report that estimates 588 million tons, almost 600 million tons of high-grade phosphate. It would make this deposit one of the largest high-grade deposits in the world, and certainly the largest in the Americas. Fundamentally, there's reasons Mexico should care very much about developing this resource or allowing us to help them do that. And that's because right now they're highly dependent on imports of this same commodity to fuel their fertilizer business and their agricultural production. So having a secure domestic supply is very important and a priority, I believe, of the new administration in Mexico. The second thing that positions us for success in having this cooperative discussion with Mexico is our joint venture partner. In December, we announced forming a joint venture with a renowned Mexican business leader in the agri-food space, Juan Cortino Gallardo, and his entity Caplat, our joint venture partner in this project. He's got a great success record for many decades operating in the agri-food space in Mexico. He's highly regarded by the government. for his expert advice and advisory. He is the president of a group called CNA, which is essentially a farm bureau representing 80% of Mexico's agri-food GDP. And in that role, he's an important advisor to government on agri-food issues. I think most importantly, I can tell you that Juan is very dedicated to this project. He and I speak 5 to 7 times a week, all hours of the day and night, and on weekends. He is completely engaged. It's also important to note that he led the investment into Odyssey that we raised at the same time as announcing this joint venture, a $4 million investment that Juan led with by taking a third of that offering. He was joined by executives from his companies in Mexico, as well as some of our largest shareholders at Odyssey, including our litigation funders. So there's a strong commitment to trying to achieve a successful outcome in this project. As we look at the Mexico project on the value curve I showed you earlier, a couple of important takeaways. First of all, 12 years ago now, in 2013, this project was valued by third-party investors at over $100 million valuation. We sold 24% of the company at that time, or the project, for $27.5 million. Where we are at this moment is where the star shows on the chart. So we've completed the environmental impact statements and pre-feasibility studies, and we're at the moment where we need to have a collaborative discussion with Mexico to understand if we can secure the rights we need to bring this project into production. Earlier, in my opening statement, I mentioned that in order for successful resource recovery for any natural resource to occur, the technology must be in place, demonstrated to be able to environmentally and economically be viable for recovering the asset. Here, that is clearly in place. Our partner for extraction is Royal Boskalis, one of the largest dredging companies in the world, over 100 years old, has been operating in Mexico for over 25 years now, and has secured over 200 of the same environmental permits we would need to operationalize this project, using the same team, tools, and technology in Mexican waters. Project, very scalable. We start at about 3 million tons a year and can grow it from there with permissions from the Mexican government. But what you're looking at, current rock phosphate prices are trading about $150 a ton. So obviously you have a project that right out of the chute produces several $100 million in revenue. And it's got a mine life of greater than 20 years, just in the first 1/3 of the license area that's been most fully explored at this point. So a long mine life, very scalable. Cook Islands, the battery metals project I mentioned again, we have investments in 2 of the 3 license holders, OML, Ocean Minerals, and CIC. Here you'll see the license area, and I noted in my earlier comment that CIC's license area is about 10 times the size of OML's. We own 14% presently of CIC and 7% of OML. And you can see from the graphic here, their license areas are adjacent. So we expect what's good for one will be good for both of these companies. And we're really excited to have investments in both of these companies that are making significant progress right now in the Cook Islands. So if I were to kind of net out why I think there is great opportunity in Odyssey in the near future. Again, we have a unique proprietary system that allows us to identify the best projects in the world. And so essentially we could rinse, wash, and repeat, bring more of these projects into production as soon as we're able to move the current projects through our pipeline. I think our 3 decades of experience demonstrating that we're very competent at executing offshore, very complicated projects successfully is a success factor that works to our advantage. And as you've seen in this presentation, we've already secured mineral rights through our proprietary system identifying the best projects and we have the strategic partnerships in place to be successful in this space. So I'd urge you to take a look at Odyssey, do some more research. As you know, you can book one-on-one meetings through the platform. If you have interest in learning more about the Odyssey story, I'd be delighted to speak with you. And with that, I think we're ready to go to Q&A.
Great, thank you, Mark. Okay, let's jump in. I want to ask, why did you choose to form the Mexico Phosphate JV with CapLat, like you mentioned?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Anna. And I'll start by saying Juan Cortino Gallardo and I have been in discussions for a number of years, 4 or 5 years now. He's been very interested in this project, and he demonstrated to me that he would be the absolute right partner at the right point in time. I think the second thing that's critically important is Mexico needs to know there's Mexican leadership in place to have the confidence to move this project forward. And I couldn't think of a better leader with his demonstrated success in the agri-food business as an operator, as the president of CNA. And so he brings a lot to the table in that regard. So I think we've picked the absolute right partner at the right time to help advance these discussions with the Mexican government.
And so Odyssey is focused on multiple projects rather than just a single initiative like many others in the industry. So talk a little bit about that strategy.
Right. So look, we believe that either strategy could be successful. If you're an owner developer of a single major project, obviously we've gotten a sense for what these asset values are during my presentation. But Odyssey's chosen to take perhaps smaller positions in a number of projects to provide diversification for commodity risk, for geopolitical risk. That's one really nice thing about seafloor mining. The mining infrastructure is on the ship and can be moved. It's not like terrestrial mining where you have to invest sometimes billions of dollars in railways and roadways and electrification, water systems. So having this diverse portfolio, coming back to your question, gives us diversification from that geopolitical risk and that commodity risk. So we're feeling really good about that. The other thing, as I mentioned, we've developed this prospectivity system right now, our proprietary system. We've already looked at over 100, almost 120 different potential jurisdictions. And we've got 60 that have graded at our highest level for being highly prospective and environments with the right type of regulatory regime. So there are a lot of projects to be done. And again, coming back to your question, we thought rather than focusing singularly on a project, having a portfolio of diverse projects just served our strategy the best.
Makes sense. Talk a little bit about what milestones should investors be watching over the next few months?
Sure. Well, I mean, specifically, as we mentioned, the Mexican project is furthest up the value curve. So on Mexico, perhaps if we're successful in making progress in discussions, we'll be able to make disclosures on where we stand. Our goal would be to build a public-private partnership with the Mexican government for the good of Mexico and for Odyssey shareholders, and for that matter, North America. So I would stay tuned for news flow coming out of those talks. We're going to need concessions reestablished, so any disclosure we have showing that concessions have been put back in place would be significant. And then any announcements on the progress of environmental permits, obviously, would be important milestones to look for. In terms of the Cook Island projects, they're in about year 3 of the exploration program. So you're starting to see the companies that were invested in there make announcements like OML has about the values of their resource. I expect CIC might make similar announcements in the future. And then they'll both be applying for trial harvesting licenses, which will be the first stage of moving those projects into production. So I think those are the milestones to key in on from our disclosures, but also from the individual companies.
And do you see increasing support for the industry from governments around the world?
Yes, we're working with multiple jurisdictions right now, and I can tell you, even we've been at this 15 years, this mineral space. I've seen a tremendous amount of momentum increase in the past year, and very much so just in the past few weeks. So yeah, we're seeing that interest spiking. You're seeing Cook Islands have been at it for a while. They've been really thoughtfully processing this opportunity to harvest minerals in an environmentally sensitive way for over a decade now. But you're seeing Norway come online, Japan, the United Nations is controlling a section of the ocean. So we're seeing a lot of movement, and I do see the momentum increasing quite a bit. I think the Cook Islands right now is a standout model where they've really prioritized their cultural values and environmental stewardship while advancing this exploration. And I think they'll set the tone for others that are on the edges right now considering coming into the space, other governments that are coming in.
And there seems to be growing momentum specifically in the US. So talk a little bit on that. What's driving this momentum and how is Odyssey positioned to respond?
Yeah, great. Another great question. In fact, 2 weeks ago today, I was in Washington, D.C. for a few days in a series of meetings on Capitol Hill and with the executive branch. Many people that are watching may have seen the activity just this week on the executive order that's being considered by President Trump to open permitting for offshore exploration. That's created a lot of focus. And in my meetings in DC, I'm seeing a variety of US policymakers right now really trying to focus in on understanding what the permitting pathways will be to advance these projects that are out there to production. So we're ready. Odyssey has the 3 decades of experience, 15 years specifically in this space, in this pipeline of projects. We have projects that we could execute anywhere around the world. I mentioned we've looked at 120. We have sites that we could activate off the US that we haven't focused on to date, because until now, there really hasn't been this momentum that we're seeing from the US government. So I think there's a lot of exciting opportunity that lies ahead, and we're positioned to capitalize on that.
And with all of that said, Mark, why is now the right time to invest in deep sea mining?
Well, I think it is the fact that, back to my opening statement, right? The technology undoubtedly exists and can be proven that the extraction of minerals from the seafloor can be done in an environmentally and economically viable manner. So we're at that table stakes point. And we're seeing constraints. I mean, again, just looking at news headlines in the past week or so about China restricting rare earth elements. The US and other governments around the world are going to need to find a source for critical minerals. And I think we're right now at that inflection point where you'll see the acceleration to offshore extraction, much like you saw the acceleration to offshore oil after the Arab oil embargo in the early 1970s.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, so much. We have so many more questions for you, but we're out of time. So we'll send them to you so you can answer on your own. But Thank you for joining us, and we would love to have you back with some updates.
Great. I'd be happy to do it. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back.